Have you ever felt torn between the relentless drive to keep running after your goals and the deep need to stop and recharge? At the end of the day, life isn't just all about running hard and running fast. It's about knowing when to pause, when to reflect, and when to refuel. And in this UNCORK conversation, we're going to explore the powerful tension between charging forward with purpose and embracing rest as a strategy for building resilience and empathy in our life. Hey, my friends, welcome back to the Uncommodified Podcast. I'm Tim Windsor, and I'll be your host for another UNCORK conversation, my favorite kind of conversation. My guest tonight on the show is Adam Hammerman. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be here.
That's going to be awesome. Adam and I were recently introduced by a former guest of my podcast show, Nancy Gentle-Boudre. If you haven't listened to that episode, you got to listen to it. And I'm really glad that she connected us. Adam and I chatted over Zoom a little while ago, and during that initial conversation, I just had this sense that I had to have Adam on my show and have this conversation. So here's a quick intro just so you get to know him a little bit as well. Adam is the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of the New York Medical College, a member of Truro University. Prior to joining the team there, Adam held the finance and operations positions at the 92nd Street Y, the Museum of the City of New York, and the Town School. And additionally, he's a New York State certified EMT technician, and for over 30 years, he's volunteered with the Hatzalah ambulance. Adam, this is an uncorked conversation. I did warn you about this. And yes, in these kind of conversations, I uncork a drink, and then we get things started. What are you going to be drinking tonight, sir?
I have a lovely single malt scotch right here.
Awesome.
All ready to go.
Looks good.
Yes.
What is that single malt scotch?
It is a 15-year-old Glenfiddich Solari.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good
Yes.
one. Well, since you're in the good old United States of America, I decided to go American bourbon. So I'm going to have some. I got this really nice bottle of Angel's Envy bourbon.
That too is delicious.
That's a delicious bourbon. And I just opened it specifically for this conversation because
Very good.
I figured that would be good. So cheers to you, sir.
Cheers.
That is excellent stuff. All right, let's get into this. So Adam, you and I are going to explore this idea again, how to turn bold ideas into action while honoring the sacred rhythm of rest and work and how it interplays in our life. And that's the interesting theme for me that came out of our conversation that we had. I was actually in my car when we had that conversation.
I remember, yes.
Yeah, I was in my car and I was in the parking lot. We were having that conversation. When we chatted, here's what I took away. It's pretty clear to me that your life embodies this spirit of charging forward. So, and getting things done, making things happen is a big part of who you are. Yet, you also have this ability to balance that somehow in your life. And that is fascinating. So I want you to think about a moment when you pushed yourself to the limit to accomplish something, when you dug deep, when you drove hard, and you accomplished something that was very significant for you. I'm interested to know, what does that kind of journey look like in Adam's life?
Well, so there are two big stories per se in my life that really come to light when you ask me about pushing. The first one obviously is when you introduced me about becoming an EMT. When Hatzalah was first being formed in the Riverdale area in the Bronx, my father and I were approached, would you like to join? And I was 18 at the time, and both my father and I looked at each other like, to have someone's life in your hands, that's a big responsibility. And it's a lot of studying, it's a lot of knowledge you have to have, and, God forbid, something, it's just so much on your shoulders. Well, fast forward a couple of months, we go to Israel to visit my cousins, my aunt and uncle, and my cousins. The plane lands, my uncle and my cousin, who are both medics in the army there, pick us up. We pull out of the airport, and between the time that they picked us up and they were pulling out, a garbage truck had flipped over right there. The driver, unfortunately, went right through the windshield, hit the pavement. We were like the first ones on the scene, and it was a mess. It was really, really a sad, sad situation. My uncle and my cousin both pulled over. They jumped out of their cars. They had these small little, emergency packs in their car. They ran over, and they started to help the patient. Unfortunately, it was like the rest of us could just stand around and stare. Ambulances came, they all took care of the patient. At the end, we just felt terrible. And my father and I just looked at each other and said, never again are we going to just be standing there. We're going to push ourselves to, no matter what it takes, this is something that raises above, we should all be able to help each other. And Fast forward another year. By age 19, I became an EMT. My father became an EMT. My mother took the class with us. It was a very interesting time taking a class, an EMT class with your parents at age 18, especially when you came up to childbirth. Here's a funny story. The teacher saying, in class, once in a while you'll encounter, you have to childbirth. Once in a while you'll encounter a breech birth. The teacher looks right past me. Yes, Mrs. Hammerman. Adam was a breach. It was terrible. So the entire class and now everyone who's watching this podcast knows that I backed into this world.
Oh my gosh, that
But,
that's funny.
but thank God we pushed ourselves, and that's what I'm talking about pushing. We pushed ourselves, and then after that, for the past, since I've been 19, and that's a good number of years ago, given the gray beard, I've been able to, thank God, be there for childbirth, for unfortunately having to deal with someone who needed to have CPR done, for saving someone who was choking, for major traumas, all kinds of things. I was there at 9/11. I was there at Miracle on the Hudson for different events. Times that we pushed, and you have to, and suddenly, when you realize that you can handle it, you feel there's a sense of calm because all of a sudden now you're in an emergent situation, be it not necessarily life-threatening, but work environment. Hey, I can handle this step by step. I know what to do. So pushing yourself sometimes really allows you to bring it down from the push to the everyday we can handle this.
Now that's first of all, that's a fascinating story. It's an interesting way that you find yourself saying, "I can do this," and you're going to move beyond the discomfort of the learning process, which isn't easy. And so, this thing that happens to you, where you see something, and you then are catalyzed towards action, is this a reoccurring theme in your life? Does this show up along the way in Adam's life, where you go, this is going to be difficult, but I know I can do it, and I know I can make that happen?
The one thing I have talked to people at work is we don't ever like to reward mediocrity. Mediocrity is not a way to just get by in life. Some people, yes, you find a comfort level, you stay, but you always have to do just a little bit more. Even like, that second story I was going to tell you about when I was first started to work at the 92nd Street Y. I remember meeting with the executive director, just pulling this out. I had some one-on-one time with him, and I said, please, you obviously started. He was actually a former accountant. He said he used to joke around, "I'm a reformed accountant," but he said, "Adam, everything you can read. You get your hands on something here, read it, understand it." And I took that, and I even went a step further. And I was a junior accountant at the time. And I remember the cash receipts manager had to go out on medical leave. I remember saying to the controller at the time, instead of hiring someone as a temp, let me do it. I'll stay late. I know, I've already know the basics of cash receipts. I'm going to learn more about it. Same thing happened when the accounts payable manager had to go on FMLA. I said, wait, I can do this and I'll get it done. I had to work many, many more hours, but I got it done. And you know what happened? After I was able to start doing more and more, I was able to prove to everyone else around, I became the go-to guy. And suddenly when the controller said that he was going to be leaving, and then the controller, I'm still friends with the former associate executive director there, the former controller, but they basically, like I said, I'd like to apply for this position as controller at age 25. They looked outside and they said, you know what? Adam is really the best choice, and at age 25, I became the controller. Of course, I was a young guy, and I had a lot on my shoulders, but I made it work. And someone else once told me, when you're looking at something and there are problems and there's things that seem so massive, and this is a great example for life, step by step, one thing. Just like even like you have to clean up a room, step by step. And it's really very, very helpful. Pushing yourself in general is always a great way of doing things and a great way of a great outlook. But if you take it step by step, like on an emergency call, step by step.
Step by step. So you have these experiences. You have this experience where you're at this accident event and it catalyzes you to move beyond say to yourself, you and your father say, you'll never find yourself in that situation again. It calls you and catalyzes you to action. You have this experience as a young man, as you're getting into your career, where you see opportunities and you don't see them as barriers. You see them as opportunities, and you say, I could do that, and you press in and you move into that. You're called to action in that as well. So that's really interesting. So clearly you're a person who runs hard in your life, chasing those goals, the dreams, the aspirations that you have. So as you're running hard, doing life hard, you also, in the conversation that you and I had, you have this other part of your life experience, which is very counterintuitive to this running hard. You have this understanding and have built in a discipline around taking time to stop and recharge and rest. And, of course, in your tradition and in your experience, this is what we would call Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested, how does Sabbath, or what role does Sabbath and resting play in energizing this ferocity towards action that you have?
So there's always, everyone always sees, like, you look on the old tape recorders, there's that pause button. And we always hit pause, to just, think about what you just listened to, or think about what you just experienced. Even in watching a movie, pause. I want to take in what I just saw. In life, we all have to hit that pause button. And I personally, during the week, my pause button and my escape is, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out and really be able to say, okay, I've been working, in between sets, I can sit there and while I'm working out, I'm focusing on not making sure the weight doesn't hit me. When I'm pausing, and because your body has to physically pause to get the strength again to do that next set, that's the time for me not only to breathe, but also to think about what's going on today, what happened today, what do I need to do, what email do I have to send later. It's it's something to be able to refocus. Vacations, and before we get into the Sabbath thing, vacations in general. In many businesses, they force you. You can not only do you get your vacation, but you must take vacation, because we don't want to get burnout. Life, if you keep going, your engines, they need to hit, you need to maintain them. We need to hit pause and take that vacation. Now, sometimes when you take a vacation and you're constantly touring, that's a very tough idea. But everyone loves those vacations, and those are the memorable ones. When you're able to sit back on a beach, sit back by a pool and just breathe and feel the warmth and enjoy with the scenery, whatever it is, and just enjoy doing something, that's time to hit pause and recharge.
Yeah. So you're
Yes.
building this into your life on a regular basis throughout your career, which obviously is important. And by the way, if you're listening for a reason. You might be one of the people who, you believe that you are celebrated because you've never, ever taken a day off, and somehow that's a badge of honor. I think that Adam's giving you some wise advice here, that you're not, you're more like the earth than you are like a machine. It's kind of interesting. Years ago, I was raised in the city. I was born and raised in a city in Canada. And when we got married, my wife and I rented a farmhouse just outside of our community, and it was owned by a community group of Hutterites who were sort of like Amish people, and they owned a series of farms. And so we lived in one of the farmhouses on this farm, and I'd never really seen a farm before. And I noticed that they didn't use all their land very wisely, in my opinion. They had some crops, and then they had land that sat empty, and I thought that was a real waste of farmland. So one time, the guy's name was Joe, the farmer who came to work on our farm. There was cattle, there were some pigs and stuff, and he would come, and I said to him, Joe, why do you guys not utilize your land better? Why do you not use this parcel of land? And he goes, Tim, you're from the city, aren't you? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, Tim, if we used the land every year and we didn't let it lie fallow, it would eventually not be able to produce anything. I had never understood. The idea of leaving the land fallow to regenerate, I didn't understand. And so he actually took me into the field, and he had me touch the soil and experience it. And he imparted to me some really powerful wisdom that time about leaving something fallow in the land and in your life, so that it can regenerate to grow more. And that, as a 21-year-old, when I first got married, I was just turning 21. That was a life lesson I'll never forget.
And you actually, that there is a Jewish law about that, about your land has to actually every 7 years has to sit fallow for it, because there's a respect for it, and you have to be able to allow it to have that hit pause.
Interesting.
And for people who have visited Israel, they actually find that it's actually there are, you have to figure out how the farmers are going to work and sustain themselves during that time of hitting pause, so to speak, and they get by, thank God. But in any event, like as they said, there's that pause, and just like when we talked before about Sabbath, for a modern, or everyone observes the Sabbath to their own extent, but for someone in my position as a modern Orthodox Jew, I actually am. It's like a forced savings. It is that I have to watch the clock on a Friday, and at sundown on Friday till sundown on Saturday, I must hit pause. We there are no phones. Obviously, to save a life, when I was an EMT, save a life. I've gone into houses, on a Sabbath, and I've been like called for an emergency. I'm like, why are the lights off? Well, it's Sabbath. I'm turning on the light because I need to see the patient, and that's going to be. But for on a regular Sabbath, there is the pause, and you sit and you get to really step back and breathe and say, okay, this is what's happened this week. Let's be able to go through what happened, all the work we've done, but also now everyone in your immediate circle is doing the same exact thing. How many times have you been I'm sure I know I've been a nice romantic dinner, you go to a restaurant, no matter how much you are appreciating being with that person, I am confident that there's a cell phone either on the table, even if it's face down, or in your pocket or something like that. We don't have that. There is no distraction whatsoever, and suddenly you're forced to, in a really, really nice way, to be with your family, to be with or be with whomever, and be able to talk and be able to really appreciate what it is we're working for. Now, you can discuss things that happened at work and all this. How was your week? What happened this week? What's going on? What's your hopes and aspirations for next week? Just to talk. And it's an incredible, incredible recharge that very often you just have to say, wow, I get to do this. And some people would find it a burden. It's like, oh my God, you can't have the phone, you can't watch TV. I mean, when I was a little kid, Saturday morning cartoons, oh my gosh, I could not watch Saturday morning cartoons. That was the biggest thing. Well, people who I know who weren't observant or anything like that were watching Saturday. Did you see this cartoon? I never saw it. I felt like, oh my God, it's terrible. You know what? I made it through. Made it through. And it's an incredible, incredible time to just really, you hit pause, and it's like as I said, it's a forced savings.
That's such a powerful idea, and I do think that unfortunately our culture has gotten away from so many of these things. I mean, I think back, even obviously I'm from Canada. I remember still in my day and age. I'm going to turn 60 this year, and when I was a child, for instance, you couldn't shop. There was no Sunday shopping. There was not, things were closed on Sunday totally. You couldn't go anywhere. Of course, it was Sunday in our culture, but there was a day of pause. There was things weren't open. You couldn't shop. You couldn't do any of these things. And I'm not sure in our progression towards this idea of more and more and more and more, I wonder if it's really taking us in the direction we want to go in the end. I wonder if we're actually getting something we don't want in the end with this. Because the reality is that when you build in these times of rest and have a habit of that, I would imagine that your productivity is probably uniquely enhanced as a result of taking pause, whereas it's counterintuitive because we think that seems to be a waste of time.
The term burnout, it's not just a term, it's a reality. Being able to hit pause in whatever shape or form. Look, not everyone has that ability to just turn things off. And look, when I'm being an EMT, I had the radio with me all the time. But you know what? That was to save a life, and I didn't go on every single call. And as I got older, I went on fewer and fewer calls, ambulance calls. But I even say to this day, I'll let the younger guys do it. Thank God for the younger guys who were able to jump. But it's a gift to be able to say, I am going to hit pause and focus on me. A Saturday afternoon nap, we call it a Shabbos nap, is an incredible thing.
Yeah. Sounds like something I need more of. I have to admit, I've started recently putting my phone down on the weekend and leaving it. I put it on my dresser and I leave it there,
Uh-huh.
and I found that to be really, really healthy for me. At the end of the day, if somebody needs us, they can contact my wife. But I often think back to the time when we didn't have cell phones and you had a phone home. If you were out, you just didn't answer the phone. I mean, that's just the way it was. I mean, but we've become so dependent on so many of these things where we feel we have more connection, but probably are less connected than we ever are to ourselves and to the world around us. So as an executive, I mean, you obviously have a big job that you do every day. When you go to work, you manage lots of people, big budgets, all the stuff that you're doing in your world. What do you think that this sort of habit? What is it? How has it made you better at what you do you think?
I respect people's downtime.
Hmm.
When I need someone during the day, yes, they're there. And having an incredible team is very important. And the word I will always use is team, and that brings us all together. We're all on the same playing level. I try to be the good coach where I can, but we all work towards the same goal. And I always tell people, I hate the term my staff, the team, our team. We're gonna figure this out together. But when the team goes home, I'll send emails. I tell people, I don't expect you to answer it. If some people need their downtime and they have their dinners, and sometimes I go back to their emails after dinner, or some people shut down early but then wake up shut down early but wake up early. Everyone has their downtime, and I don't expect everyone to be focusing on my time. So that's the most important thing that I see in terms of the hitting pause, is respecting other people's pause, in whatever capacity they take it.
There's a lot of wisdom there. Again, if you're listening in, I'm just going to challenge you to think, what does this mean for you? So what does it mean to run hard, to make things happen, to see a problem like Adam did in his life and say, I can solve that, I can make it happen, I can learn, I can build capacity to do great things. At the same time, while and honoring this understanding of rejuvenation and replenishment in our life. That's a very powerful idea. And again, if you're listening in, I really want to challenge you. Maybe right now you ought to hit pause in this podcast and just ask yourself, why am I listening, and what is this conversation mean to me? Because that to me is a really important thing. And, Adam, we said we would sort of find the conversation along the way that we wanted to have. So I'm interested to explore this idea. So you have within your tradition this idea of the Sabbath rest, this idea of pause. You mentioned that, I was telling you about my experience on the farm. You mentioned that, within your tradition, there's this idea, again, letting land lie fallow every 7 years. If I understand correctly as well, and I do a lot of reading, so I have maybe a cursory knowledge of some of these things, not I think the same knowledge that you would have, but I also think that there is a principle within Jewish tradition, also from the farming sort of tradition, around leaving a margin in your field, the outskirts of your field, and not actually harvesting all that you plant or that you could gain food or income from. Help me understand a little bit more about that, and what do you see in that idea that's also informative? Because I think they're connected ideas.
So there's that you leave a portion of your field. There's that rule that as like I guess a way of saying is a donation.
Yes.
And you let the poor, and they come and they can harvest it themselves. It's basically giving charity, but not actually handing it to them, letting them go forth and get it themselves on their own, and they feel like, I'm going to harvest it myself. I'm going to do the work. Now, granted, I couldn't have done it without the farmer letting me do this,
Yes.
but it's empowering people. And that's what we do. Like, not only does it allow, there's that, I think that there's the term that in Catholicism, I think, tithe.
Yes.
So just like in synagogue we have charity boxes. People do have them at home, and just like in church, you have the baskets that people you're giving through. Here in a farm, it's like this is their way of giving a percentage to the poor and allowing them not only just to take the handout, but to work for it. And when you allow people to really work and learn, what is that? What's the saying? Give a man a fish, you feed him for teach a man to fish. That may be allowing suddenly the poor who don't necessarily have that ability. Suddenly they start learning. Oh, how am I going to start harvesting? Oh, maybe I could do this on my own. Maybe I could start. And it'll allow me to grow even further. When I worked with junior accountants, I could very easily, very often, figure certain things out of how we're going to do it. I remember one accountant who came into my office and they kept questioning me. What about this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And I remember saying to the person, I trust you. And we're just doing accounting here. I want you to go through the entire process. And you know what? If you make a mistake, we can reverse the journal entry. But I believe in you. And all of a sudden it's like, they suddenly it's like, oh yeah, we're just doing counting. When people learn things, when people understand things, also another way of hitting pause is an EMT story. I was once on a very bad call in a health club where I was the first one on the scene, and there was a first responder who happened to be, working in the health club. They knew the basic first aid, and the person was deteriorating very quickly. And I had an ambulance on the way back up, and I'm there, and I said, I'm taking out my BVM, my bad virus mask, because I know I'm going to end up having to breathe for this person. And the first responder says, oh my God, I think they're going to stop breathing. And I had to look at them, and I said, and if they do, we know what to do. And they looked at me and they said, you're right. I said, that you empower people. All of a sudden you realize, okay, I have this knowledge. I'm going to grow on. I'm going to be able to do things. You can, every step by step, it all circles back.
Step by step, yeah. No, it's a very interesting thing. I love this idea of again of empowerment, and that this idea of leaving that margin of the field, which is interesting because what it does is it dignifies the person actually
Mm-hmm.
to do the work required to harvest, to eat. But I also think, and I wonder if this is, I don't know, but I wonder if historically we talk about leaving a margin in our life, and I wonder if maybe the ideas are connected, because I think the challenge for all of us is we don't have any margin in our life. We live right to the edge of everything, and I think that's problematic. I think unfortunately our culture rewards it, it lauds it, it celebrates it in some ways. But when you always live to the margin of your life, whether it's financially, think about whether it's physically, whether it's financially, if you're always living to the extent of your bank account and maybe into overdraft, which a lot of people do, as a company, as an organization, if you don't have margin, if you don't have some capital excess that you use as a buffer zone, you're going to run into a subset of personal and professional financial problems. And most of our society, unfortunately, if you think about it, lives well beyond the margin of their financial life because they exist on credit. They live well beyond their margin. And this is a macro problem in our life, and it's a macro problem in business in our society. Would you agree? Yeah.
You be able to make sure you can pay for that. Obviously, we all have certain times. I personally don't like living on debt at all. Obviously, for a mortgage, that's one thing. But for regular credit card expenses, if I can't afford it, I'm gonna think twice about it. Now that's my personal. Businesses, there's a whole way of living on debt and operating on debt. Yeah, I mean, just a matter of fact, when you want to build something, that's how we come up with bonds and things like that, where you can't afford it, but there's a way to make it happen because that's how the world revolves in terms of the banking world.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let me ask you, I want to sort of bring this conversation and wrap it up, and I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to do that. So if you were giving somebody coaching advice, you were giving me coaching advice, and you were helping me say to take action. Maybe I was coming to you and say, "Hey, I see a problem and I wish I could solve it, but I don't have the skills and I don't know if I can do it." What's the best advice you would give me that would make me sort of seize the moment and say, just get up and do it. You can do it, Tim.
Well,
How would you encourage me to do that?
you're not necessarily, you don't know everything that you want to do, okay? But there's always a way to get to it. Like for example, when in my field, when I was at the 92nd Street Y, I oversaw, aside from accounting, I oversaw operations as well. And I remember telling people, I don't know how to fix an HVAC system, but I know the people that do. And I know enough to have them explain to me what's going on, what the issues are, where, and also resources how to get further. If someone's out of work, is not at work that day, and I know that he's the expert, okay, or she's the expert, I can go to this other person, this vendor. How am I going to get this done? Same thing with anything that you're going to be doing. As long as you know the direction to go to where you want to get that, be it I want to get a further degree. I want to get more information. I want to learn. I'm not an accountant, but I want to learn accounting. Okay? So many of us are very, very smart, and we work with very, very smart people who know I know this, but I know I can learn more. Do it. Just like that first advice that I ever got from the executive director of the 92nd Street Y. Read everything you can.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? It's good advice, because I think sometimes what happens is that we live it with a sense of limitation when in fact we have great capacity that we usually don't explore. So let's move this question now in this direction. Let's say I'm starting to burn out in my life. I'm not honoring the principle of Sabbath. I'm not getting this idea of rest. What would be your first piece of advice for if I was going to try to move into something, start to explore that? What's the simplest way I can start doing that?
It's again, you're trying to realize how you need to hit pause to think it through, to plan and every morning, many people make lists, or the night before, they make lists of what they're planning on doing, either that day or the next day of the week. That's their way of hitting pause and being able to regroup. Even if it's a to-do, I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. Well, that's a kind of way of saying, I'm pausing, and I'm lining things up. I'm organizing my life as to what has to happen. When I was at two different places, we were using antiquated accounting systems. And every night I'd go home and I'd be like, this is tough. And I started to just do my own little research. And I remember back in the day, we were using this old AS400 terminal-based system. And I said, I know there's new stuff out there. And I remember talking to the director of IT. And I said, in this past weekend, Sabbath, I started just to think. And I'm like, there's got to be something we can do. His eyes opened so wide. I remember it's Connie Cadigan. He was such a guy. I'm still friendly with him. He was able to. He suddenly said, "Yes, I want this. We can do this, Adam." And suddenly, I had a partner in the IT department, and Connie and I went to different vendors, and we went to different other places, and we ended up putting a brand new accounting system in. Obviously, it's not just two of us. It took an entire village, so to speak, to get it done. But it's because we sat back, we hit pause, we talked about it, we thought it all through. And I actually ended up putting another accounting system in another place I worked, at the museum when I was there. Because it made it a little bit easier that I had the experience of what had to go through after the first time. But I remember it's only when you hit pause do you get some clarity. Even those lists every day, every night. You get clarity of what's going to be. And that's my attitude.
It's great. It's great. And again, I think that makes it so accessible. So again, you probably, if you're listening in, you're probably not ready to press pause from sundown to sundown to sundown. Probably not ready for that yet. You maybe someday. But a little pause. Just what's a little pause that you can press day to day, week to week, and get some habit forming, and then maybe build up to larger times of pause. But there's some real wisdom in this conversation. I'm going to encourage you to think about this as you leave. Again, we want to get stuff done. We want to accomplish great things. We want to take great action. We want to solve great problems, big problems, but we also want to understand that we need to recharge and re-energize ourselves for the journey. So real wisdom in this conversation. Let's end our conversation here, Adam. So for me, this podcast is born out of this idea of uncommodified. Uncommodified for me is this idea that, we if we're not careful, we become a commodity. Not just the things we sell or the things we buy, but we become a commodity. We become like everybody else because we're conditioned sort of to fit in and sit down and sort of fall into the background. But I actually believe that we were created in unique ways to bring unique contributions. I think, Adam, you're a rather unique individual who's brought unique contributions to the worlds that you've interacted with over the years. That's what intrigues me so much about just meeting you and talking to you. So here's a question. When you walk into a room and you're bringing that unique expression that is Adam Hammerman, the unique expression of Adam into a room, and you're being your most uncommodified self, you're being free to be who you were created to be, what are you doing that is bringing a positive contribution in that room? What's that unique thing that Adam's bringing into that space that is providing a positive impact on the people you connect with?
Growing up, I was a very quiet kid. And people find it hard to believe. I used to be at a table and I'd look for someone. Can you pass the salt? Wait for them to make eye contact. And I was always wowed by the guy who could walk into that room and start talking. Well, I found that when I broke out of that shell and I said, I'm going to come in, and not only am I going to emulate the people that I was wowed by that could walk into a room and say hi to everyone, I was also wowed by the people who, when they shook your hand and when they looked at you, they made that connection. People talk about, Bill Clinton, how he was able to make it so that no matter what was going on, you were the only person that he was talking with. I tried to do that, very much so. When I meet people, when I say hi to them, I look at them, I shake their hand. I'm always dismayed by people who shake your hand, they're and they start looking around, or they're just, focus on the person that's in front of you. That will make them feel good about their connection with you, and they'll remember that. And try to use their name. It's like a Dale Carnegie kind of trick. Use their name, remember their name. And I actually, even if I've seen people, if you and I would see each other in a couple of weeks from now, I'll be like, Tim, Adam Hammerman, of course that. But this way, it puts you at ease, because let's just say, ooh, who's that guy I just, and people will say, of course, Adam, I know you. Yeah, that's great, terrific. I just didn't make a difference. Now you're at ease. Put people at ease and make them appreciate having a conversation with you.
That's great advice, and it really is an uncommodifying thing, because there's so many times when we are with somebody sharing space and we're really not there. And so to actually be present in that moment for another human is a unique gift in and of itself. Adam, really wonderful conversation. Really appreciate having it with you. I am really challenged by this conversation because rest is something I'm not great at. Admittedly, I am not great at. My wife is really good at this. She understands it. And I often say actually in the book that I wrote, I talk about people that the uncommodified people that I've met, they're action and non-action superheroes. And I tell a story in that about my wife. And, when we go on vacation, if we go to, let's say, the Caribbean, I jokingly say that my wife measures the quality of a day based on the depth of the lines that the chair has left in her legs. She knows how to rest, but she also knows how to meditate. And so she's almost every morning we've been married 38 years. And so
it's getting serious, I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's probably a serious relationship by now. But every morning that I can remember for the past 38 years that we've lived together, my wife has taken time and put it aside for meditation, for prayer, for her. And that is a form of pausing and collecting. And I am admittedly horrible at this. And so it's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to have this conversation with you, because this really is part of my own journey. I know how to get stuff done. I know how to work hard. I know how to make things happen. I don't know how to rest well. And when I was talking to you, I'm talking about all the accomplishment and all the things you did, and then all of a sudden we sort of went through this portal about rest. That was quite intriguing to me. And so thanks for giving me the gift of this conversation, because it's a real provocation to me. I believe it'll be a provocation to the people who listen. And I really appreciate your time. And so as we finish up, I just want to say, if you listened in, you're listening for a reason. Do me a favor. Email me at tim@uncommodified.com. Look me up on social media, DM me. But let me know as you uncork this conversation and contemplate it and apply it. Let Adam and I know what you're doing with this idea. How are you activating new things to get stuff done? And how are you activating times of pausing the button on your machine so that you can replenish yourself? Thanks again for listening. Have a great day. Cheers.